What is cellular respiration? Before we go into the details of cellular respiration, first we have to know what is cell. And being a student of 9th standard, you must have very much know how about what is a cell. This in this slide you can see the diagram of a cell, the boundary, which is called the cell membrane. Inside the cell you can see different organelles, including nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, this membrane, the Golgi apparatus, lysosomes, and mitochondria. So this is the whole cell and including its all organelles. We are going to get our focus on mitochondria, all right? Because mitochondria is also known as powerhouse of the cell because of the reason that it is involved in cellular respiration, which is our topic today. All right? Now so coming towards our topic directly, mitochondria, you see there a colorful diagram in which there is an outer membrane, the dark green, the inner membrane, the yellow one, the blue matrix or the fluid inside the membrane. Inner membrane is known as matrix, and this is the folding of inner membrane. This is known as cristae. All right, and now let's study about further important structures of this organelle. We see F0 and F1 particles here in the inner membrane which are attached to it. Ribosomes are here, DNA. What is the purpose of DNA? Every organelle which is having DNA, it means that it can replicate itself because it is having whole machinery inside and it can replicate whenever it is needed. So mitochondria is a self-sufficient organelle. It can divide itself by the process of fission. Now that was a structure. Now coming towards cellular respiration, what it is? Cellular respiration is what cells do to break up sugars to get energy they can use. This happens in all life forms. For example, in all plants, on all animals, all bacteria, every cell respires because all living organisms are composed of cells. All right, and every cell in every living organism, whether it is prokaryotic or it is eukaryotic, whether it is single cell organism such as bacteria or it is multicellular organisms such as animals or plants, every cell in each organism has to respire. Just like every human being has to respire in order to be alive. कॉन्सेप्ट समझ आ रहे हैं कि जिस तरह लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म ह्यूमन बींग्स को रेस्पायर करने की जरूरत होती है, हम एयर इनहेल करते हैं, ऑक्सीजन इनहेल करते हैं, कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड बाहर एक्सहेल करते हैं. सो दैट इज organismic level of respiration. Now we are composed of cells. Each cell of our body has to respire in order to be alive. Cellular respiration takes in food and uses it to create ATP. What was ATP? We already studied in our previous topic. ATP is the energy currency of every living organism, of every living cell. So in cellular respiration, what is taking place? The creation of or the metabolism of this ATP. It is a chemical which the cell uses for energy. For example, in our daily life, we use currency notes and coins as our currency. All right, cell use ATP as their energy currency, as their currency. All right, in cellular respiration, food is oxidized to carbon dioxide and oxygen is reduced to water. Organisms utilize oxygen for breakdown of carbon hydrogen bonds present in food. Organisms break carbon hydrogen bonds which are present in food. I'll explain it later. This breakdown releases energy and is saved in the form of ATP. Hence, we can configure that cellular respiration is energy yielding process. Now coming towards the simpler parts, कि cellular respiration में basically होता क्या है कि whenever we eat some food, for example, when we eat some burger or when we eat an apple, all right, the mechanical process which take place is that we churn that food in our mouth and then it goes in our stomach. All right, in stomach the food is absorbed, all the important nutrients they got absorbed, and what is happening, useful material is absorbed into the body, into the cells of the body, and waste materials are excreted out. So that was the whole process. Now the useful things which are absorbed, उन चीजों को break down करना है, ठीक है. जो हमने एप्पल खाया उसके अंदर जो हमने एप्पल में स्टार्च स्टोर था, ग्लूकोज था सुक्रोज की फॉर्म में, तो वो उसकी ब्रेक डाउन होगी ताकि हमारी बॉडी का ईच सेल उस एनर्जी को यूज कर सके. ठीक हो गया. चाहे वो अब हर सेल में ये प्रोसेस होगा, चाहे वो मसल सेल है, चाहे हमारा वो न्यूरॉन्स है. ईच एंड एवरी सेल ऑफ द बॉडी हैज टू गो सेलुलर रेस्पिरेशन, हैज टू रेस्पायर टू यील्ड एनर्जी विच इज एटीपी. एटीपी अगर सेल के पास होगी तभी तो वो अपने प्रोसेस कंप्लीट कर सकेगा. फॉर एग्जांपल अगर आपको पता है प्रोटीन जो फॉर्मेशन होती है वो किस ऑर्गेनेल का फंक्शन होती है? Ribosomes are organelles which are specialized for protein formation. So जब सेल के पास एनर्जी ही नहीं होगी, सेल के पास एटीपी ही नहीं होगी, तो how the cell is going to make proteins? तो सेल को प्रोटीन बनाने के लिए एनर्जी चाहिए. सेल को जो है अगर सेल के अंदर कोई बैक्टीरिया एंटर हो गया तो उसको किल करने के लिए एनर्जी चाहिए. एवरीथिंग इन दिस यूनिवर्स रिक्वायर्स एनर्जी. ऑलराइट. Now the glucose that is in our body has to be break down to get energy. This is a simple equation. The red one is glucose. It is breaking down by this whole process we will discuss, and the product is what? Energy in the form of ATP. Likewise, we do not eat only glucose. हम सिर्फ glucose या starch तो नहीं eat करते हैं, हम proteins भी लेते हैं, हम milk लेते हैं, हम meat खाते हैं. We eat fats and we rely upon oils and vegetables as well. So everything that we eat has to be converted into smaller and simpler substances so that it can be converted into, it can be utilized to get our body, to get each cell of our body energy in the form of ATP. इसमें क्या होगा कि the oxygen that we inhale is utilized in the process of cellular respiration. Water is released and carbon dioxide is released, and the product is always ATP. Now, just look at this video. I hope that will make your concept much clearer.
All living things practice cellular respiration. This includes bacteria, fungi, plants, and animals. But why is cellular respiration important? It is important because living organisms generate energy for daily activities with cellular respiration. In plants and animals, cellular respiration takes place at the mitochondria. Think of the mitochondria as a power plant for the cell, because the energy of the cell is generated at the mitochondria. Just like these power plants and turbines in this video generate power for their city. Cells that need more energy have more mitochondria, like muscles. At the mitochondria, the sugar combines with oxygen to produce carbon dioxide plus water and energy in the form of ATP. This process of cellular respiration generates energy to help keep living organisms alive. Thanks for watching. Movie Math uploads a new math video, science, or motivation.
So I hope you must be very clear about the concept of cellular respiration. Now, what we are going to get our focus on is aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Basically, cellular respiration is divided into two phases or two types. We can call one is aerobic respiration, the other one is anaerobic respiration. We will study them in detail. First of all, aerobic respiration, cellular respiration which takes place in the presence of oxygen. Aero, it means air or oxygen. So the respiration, the type of cellular respiration in which oxygen is involved. Oxygen, which take place in the presence of oxygen, is known as aerobic respiration. Complete oxidation of glucose. What happens in aerobic respiration is that in the presence of oxygen, like we have just seen in our previous picture, this one, that this is a glucose. It has been breaking down in the presence of glucose so that ATP can be produced. So that kind of respiration in which certain substance is broken down in the into ATP, while meanwhile oxygen is also present. So we call it aerobic respiration, and this is complete oxidation of glucose so that uh, carbon dioxide and water, they are also produced as a byproduct. All right. So when energy is produced in the presence of oxygen and complete oxidation of glucose takes place. What is oxidation? As we have already discussed that topic, oxidation, we learned about that oxidation is loss of electrons or loss of hydrogen. Yes. Now, what is the formula of glucose? C6H12O6. Now, we are going to remove all of the hydrogens from glucose, converting it into carbon dioxide, CO2. All right. So in this case, glucose is being oxidized, all hydrogens are removed, all electrons are removed, and the product will be water and oxygen, including ATP. And in this process of complete oxidation of glucose or aerobic respiration, there is maximum release of energy in the form of ATP. Now coming towards the summary of the topic. Glucose in the presence of oxygen is breaking down so that carbon dioxide is produced, water is produced with the maximum production of energy. And here is it in this diagram, you can see there is a cell. All right. This cell is the body cell which is present near the blood vessel here. You can see the blood vessel in which red blood cells are flowing. Now, around the blood cell, obviously there are body cells are present. These body cells, they are giving what? They are giving carbon dioxide to the blood, and that red blood cells, as we all know, blood contains hemoglobin, and that hemoglobin is carrying oxygen. Is that oxygen and glucose, they are given away to the body cells, and the excess carbon dioxide and water after the production of, for example, you can see here those red blood cells are providing glucose and oxygen to the body cell. In this cell, there are mitochondria present that are processing the aerobic respiration in this body cell, converting that glucose and oxygen into carbon dioxide and water and energy. And the products, they are giving away this carbon dioxide, water and energy to this blood cell. These blood cells now going to the towards the heart. And what is the heart doing there? Our heart is pumping the blood and making it oxygenated. The less oxygen blood is exchanged with oxygen rich blood, and that oxygen rich blood is then coming back to the body cells so that that glucose and oxygen can be processed by the process of aerobic respiration, and energy is produced. Again, the cycle continues. That was a simple example in order to explain aerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, there are two main phases. In first phase, we are going to study glycolysis, and in second phase, we are going to study the exact process of aerobic respiration uh, in our next lessons. And now just have a quick review about what we are going to study in our upcoming lesson. This is the glucose. You can see here 6 carbon compound, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, C6H12O6. Just for your ease, they are just showing 6 carbon compound. After glycolysis, what is happening? Glycolysis is the first phase of cellular respiration, so it has to require ATP from outside so that it can break down this glucose into 2 pyruvate molecules. That NAD plus is also required. All right, in first phase, that glucose is converted into 2 3 carbon compounds. 1 6 carbon compound is broken down and converted into 2 3 carbon compounds, one a pyruvate, another pyruvate, 2 pyruvates with the production of ATP and 2 NADH. That is a brief summary. We are going to discuss all of these steps in detail, so you don't have to worry about it. In second phase, what we will be studying in our upcoming lesson, that in the glycolysis, first phase of aerobic respiration, what is happening? Glucose is converted into pyruvic acid or pyruvate with the release of 2 ATP. What is happening there? Here is written 2 ATP, while in our previous picture we have shown this 4 ATP. From this 4 ATP, 2 ATPs are then given back, given to the glycolysis of next process. All right. So energy 2 ATP are removed, so that that ATP that are used, they are then paying off. All right. Now here 2 ATP. In aerobic respiration second phase, what will be happening? The Krebs cycle and then electron transport chain, so that we can produce carbon dioxide, ATP molecules and water. The oxygen that I was talking about in aerobic respiration is entered in the last step of aerobic respiration, oxygen. For just like we have studied in our photosynthesis topic, in dark reaction, carbon dioxide, obviously it was a reactant, but it was used in the second phase of the photosynthesis, in the dark reaction of the photosynthesis. So likewise here, oxygen is used in the last step of the aerobic respiration. You can see here 36 ATPs are produced. This is large amount of energy. All right. Now 36 plus 32, total 38 ATPs are produced when we break down one glucose molecule in the presence of oxygen. The products will be 38 molecules of ATP, 1 carbon dioxide and 1 water. From these arrows you can see here, that is that ATP is releasing from this step, carbon dioxide is releasing from Krebs cycle, electron transport chain is consuming oxygen and giving us what? 36 ATP, including water as a byproduct. Now, the whole cycle, it takes place inside a cell. But the glycolysis that we learned as the first phase of aerobic respiration, it takes place in cytoplasm. As you can see here, the boundary of the cell, for example, let's consider this as a complete cell. All right. Here the cytoplasm, mitochondria, nucleus and all other organelles. But in cytoplasm, glycolysis is converted into pyruvate. In cytoplasm, that pyruvate or pyruvic acid, it is then transported inside the mitochondria. It will pass out outer membrane and then it has to pass out the inner membrane in order to undergo the next phase of aerobic respiration, which is Krebs cycle. The products of Krebs cycle were NADH, FADH2 and ATP. NADH and FADH2 are used in oxidative phosphorylation or ATP formation, or we can say that electron transport chain. Just like we studied in light reaction of photosynthesis, the products of light reaction of photosynthesis like NADPH and ATP, they were used by Krebs cycle, the other phase of the photosynthesis, or Kelvin cycle, sorry. Now, that is a brief summary about cellular respiration. I hope you understand the topic completely. If you have any question, you are free. Any question? You can unmute yourself.
No, teacher.
Have you understand the concept completely? What is aerobic respiration? And what we have studied about cellular respiration, the product will be ATP, which is energy currency. All right. But the reactants will be, it can be glucose, it can be proteins, it can be fatty acids. All right. While another reactant is oxygen, because it is aerobic respiration and it is taking place in the presence of oxygen. Am I clear now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Our next topic will be anaerobic respiration. And in the subtopics include types of fermentation. Objective, we will be able to understand anaerobic respiration and its types, including lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. Your concept must be clear about anaerobic respiration, so make sure you listen it carefully. Now, let's have a quick recap what we have learned about aerobic respiration. All right.
Is a really big deal. So many organisms, from fish to plants to humans, need oxygen. And yes, even though plants make oxygen in photosynthesis, they still perform cellular respiration, and therefore plants still need oxygen themselves. There's often a misconception that plants don't need oxygen. That's just not true. So why do these organisms need oxygen? It's similar to why you need oxygen. If you've ever wondered why you need to breathe, which is done by the respiratory system in your body, zoom into the cell level. Cells in your body use the oxygen you inhale to perform cellular respiration. The formula here requires inputs, otherwise known as reactants, to make ATP. And oxygen is one of those reactants in the overall equation that is needed to break glucose down in forming ATP. Why ATP? ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate, and it's action-packed with 3 phosphates. It has the ability to power many cellular processes. Typically, and it's action-packed with 3 phosphates. It has the ability to power many cellular processes. Typically, it's coupled to other things that it may be powering. Now, after losing the phosphate, the molecule is ADP, adenosine diphosphate, because it has 2 phosphates. In cellular respiration, though, there are enzymes that can add another phosphate to it and convert it back into ATP again. This particular formula of cellular respiration is aerobic, meaning overall.
तो अभी हमने जो कैटाबॉलिक एक्टिविटी पढ़ी थी कि एटीपी जो है एनर्जी फोटोसिंथेसिस में यूज होती है बाय ब्रेकिंग डाउन 1 फॉस्फेट बॉन्ड। तो सेलुलर रेस्पिरेशन में एटीपी किस तरह फॉर्मेशन इसकी हो रही है कि उस एडीपी से एडिनोसिन डाइफॉस्फेट के साथ एक और फॉस्फेट अटैच कर दिया जाता है एंड आफ्टर दैट व्हाट हैपेंस कि एटीपी की सिंथेसिस कंप्लीट हो जाती है और दैट सिंथेसिस इज इन द प्रेजेंस ऑफ ऑक्सीजन। दैट्स व्हाई वी कॉल इट एरोबिक रेस्पिरेशन।
It requires oxygen. It's pretty complex, and we have a video breaking down the.
All right. Now, that was all about aerobic respiration that we have learned in our previous animation. Coming towards our next topic, which is anaerobic respiration. What we are going to study in anaerobic respiration is that it is a type of cellular respiration which occurs in the absence of oxygen. All right. Anaerobic respiration in the absence of oxygen, aerobic respiration in the presence of oxygen. What happens in anaerobic respiration is that glucose is incompletely oxidized or incompletely breaking down. In aerobic respiration, glucose is completely oxidized. So when glucose is not completely broken down, less amount of energy is released. And first step is similar to aerobic respiration, which was glycolysis, obviously. The breakdown of glucose into 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. All right. Now, the first step was similar to aerobic respiration. What was the first step of aerobic respiration? It was breakdown of glucose into pyruvic acids. Now, anaerobic respiration, it is happening without oxygen, and we also call it fermentation. Any organic compound is used, such as glucose, proteins, and fatty acids. Now, that compound will be breaking down in the form of 2 pyruvic acid molecules, similar step, which is glycolysis, and 2 ATPs are produced, as we already discussed it. Now, anaerobic pathway will start. Unlike aerobic respiration, in anaerobic respiration, what will happen? No Krebs cycle will take place, no ATC will take place, only simple fermentation or anaerobic process will take place. We will discuss it later. In the first step, glucose 6-carbon compound, it is breaking down by, you can see it is the same process, 2 ATP are used and 2 NAD are used. Glucose is breaking down into 2 pyruvate or 2 pyruvic acid molecules with the release of 4 ATP and 2 NADH. Now, 2 ATP are then paying back to paid off to the process that are consumed earlier in the process of glycolysis. In the second case, what is happening? Let's look at this video to understand.
This process is called fermentation, and that's what we're going to focus on. Fermentation is a way to be able to handle the little to no oxygen issue. It allows for glycolysis to happen and for glycolysis to keep going. That means making ATP where there is no oxygen. And while you won't make as much ATP in this process as you would aerobic cellular respiration, you can't be too picky when oxygen isn't around. Okay, so recall what glycolysis is from our cellular respiration video. In glycolysis, you take glucose, a sugar, and it gets converted into pyruvate. This takes a little ATP cost to actually start it up, but overall, per glucose, you make 2 net ATP molecules, and you also produce 2 NADH.
So That is the review of what is happening in anaerobic respiration. The first step, the same, breaking down of glucose 6 carbon compound into 2 molecules of pyruvates, 3 carbon compounds with the release of 2 ATPs, and NADH also produced. What is happening in case of animals? Lactic acid fermentation will take place, and in plants, and also, yes, in case of plants, alcoholic acid fermentation. In lactic acid fermentation, the product is lactic acid, hence the name lactic acid fermentation. In alcoholic fermentation, the product is alcohol or ethyl alcohol, hence it is known as alcoholic fermentation. While the difference is that in alcoholic fermentation, carbon dioxide is also produced. Note that only glycolysis produces energy. No ATP is producing from lactic acid and alcoholic fermentation. You can see here, glycolysis is giving us 2 ATP, but in the case of aerobic respiration, that complete Krebs cycle was giving us 36 ATPs, while here you can see no ATP. So only glycolysis is giving us 2 ATP, while after the completion of whole aerobic respiration, we will get 38 ATP molecules. In contrast, in case of anaerobic respiration, we get only 2 ATPs. So anaerobic respiration produces less ATP, while aerobic respiration produces more ATP. Now, coming towards our anaerobic respiration overview, glucose is converted into pyruvate by the process of glycolysis. Now, in case of yeast and plants, carbon dioxide and ethanol are produced, which is then converted into ethanol. In case of animals, that pyruvate is converted into lactic acid. Let's look into details of alcoholic fermentation. What is happening here? Sugar in the form of glucose is then converted into ethanol, but in the presence of, we already studied that in case of yeast and plants. So we also added yeast. That yeast, it is happening. What it is doing here is that it is eating up this sugar. You can see here in the diagram, it is eating up the sugar, and it is reducing this sugar or oxidizing this sugar into carbon dioxide, ethanol, and energy in the form of ATP. But that energy is very, very small to be counted. All right. Now, this is the same demonstration of alcoholic fermentation, in which yeast molecule, it is eating up sugars in the food and converting them into carbon dioxide, these gas bubbles, and ethanol, which is liquid. Alcoholic fermentation, the products will be ethanol and carbon dioxide. Alcoholic fermentation is used to make beer, bread, and wine. Anaerobic respiration, that was a simple process. In case of anaerobic respiration, let's take the look at the chemical equation. Glycolysis. In the process of glycolysis, what is happening? 2 ATP are produced and 2 pyruvate. That pyruvate is then converted into 2 lactate or lactic acid molecules. Lactic acid molecules, the products of lactic acid fermentation are cheese, yogurt, and very sore muscles. For example, when someone is doing over exercise, the muscles ache due to the production of lactic acid in our muscles. Let's have a look at this video for anaerobic.
Welcome to Moo Moo Math and Science. In this video, I'd like to talk about fermentation, also called anaerobic respiration. Sometimes cells need to produce energy whenever oxygen is not present. A solution to this is called fermentation, and it provides energy for cells without using oxygen. It is also called anaerobic respiration. It does produce energy, but it is less efficient than aerobic respiration that uses oxygen. There are 2 types of fermentation: alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid.
Now, why anaerobic respiration is less efficient as compared to aerobic respiration? The reason is that anaerobic respiration is giving us only 2 ATPs, while aerobic respiration is giving us 38 ATPs, as we have already studied.
Fermentation. The first type I'd like to talk about, alcoholic fermentation, occurs in plants and yeast whenever oxygen is not present. The cell takes glucose, technically pyruvic acid, and it is converted into ethanol, which is a type of alcohol, and then some carbon dioxide and energy. This is how many wines and beer are created. The other type occurs in animals, including humans. What happens with this is you take glucose, again technically pyruvic acid, and it's converted into lactic acid plus energy. This occurs when the cell needs energy and there's just not enough oxygen. To get an idea of how inefficient fermentation is, during aerobic respiration, 36 ATPs are produced per glucose, and in fermentation, only 2 ATPs are produced. So there we go, 2 types of fermentation, alcoholic and lactic acid, but they're helpful because it helps to create energy when there's no oxygen around. Thanks for watching, and Moo Math Up.
So that was our quick recap. We learned about anaerobic respiration. It's 2 types, alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. That is a quick review of what we have learned in the both process. I hope you have already remembered the complete topic. And this is your assignment. Define and explain different types of respiration with their chemical equations. All right. So that was all for your today's lesson.